Lyn Buchanan is one of the remote viewers of the now declassified military program called Stargate. He is also the author of a book called The Seventh Sense. So specifically, Lyn was a trainer and remote viewer or an official psychic for this program. This program was intended to find both military targets and victims or locations. Controlled remote viewing is seen as a highly specific scientific method, and we will be discussing some of the ways it was utilized. Lyn's company now is still in operation, training, and offering pro bono services, and it is called Problems, Solutions, and Innovations. Good evening, Lyn. Are you here right now?
I'm here.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining us. And thank you for coming in to help educate us and inspire us.
Well,
Thank
I hope,
you.
hope I can help some.
Lyn, I was just fascinated by your work, and I probably also had somewhat of a different impression of what you did because of, some of the things that we keep hearing across the world on the internet about different forms of psychic work.
Yeah.
And what I found interesting about your different sources or different websites was they all described it very differently. Please tell us a bit about yourself, and I'd love to ask with this one very important question. And why did you get into the military?
Why in the military?
Yes, because you're such an intelligent man. You've got psychology, you have languages, and you definitely seem intellectual as well. Specifically, was that of just what your interests were? It was just partly my interest in your aspirations or your personality as well.
Well, it's a sort of a personal story, but I was teaching German in East Texas, and the superintendent of the school systems was crooked, to say the least. I caught him beating up children, and it was with fists and everything, and it was a small little town, and that got me into small town politics, and finally I had been in the Army National Guard, and finally I just decided, hell with this. I went ahead and went active service and got myself out of there. My family was in danger. We were in danger. All kinds of threats and attacks and everything else. And so that's how I got into the military. and I was a German linguist. I went in as a German linguist, and in standard military style, they said, "Oh, you're fluent in German? Good, we're going to send you to Russian school." And so I wound up in Russian school, and that wound me up in, of all places, Germany. And when I was over there, the incidents happened that got me into the remote viewing unit.
It's fascinating. It seems like a pure motivation, and I really respect that. So you probably found out that you were very good at caring for people, and you had to channel that into something more constructive.
Yeah, I always have, and I've always been very protective of my students. And when I found out what was going on with this superintendent in this small town, and that he was doing what he was doing to the children, I had to do something. And small town politics being what they are, I found they wound up leaving.
Yeah, I understand. And so that brought you into this fascinating program that started in the late 70s, or is that correct, Lyn?
It started in sort of a vague form in the mid-60s, worked its way into the 70s, and officially started in the early 70s. I got into it in the early 80s, and it was dissolved, so to speak, in the early 90s.
And now, for all of us that are curious about this, please give us a little tiny insight as to what this operation was about?
Okay. On the internet, you will find all kinds of claims about remote viewing and remote viewing teaching and teachers and so forth. Basically, what happened was in the early 90s, when this became public, basically everybody who was a psychic started calling themselves a remote viewer and teaching remote viewing classes, and most of them, or a lot of them, started claiming connections with the military and so on, just to give themselves a more, a better reputation. The fact is that in the early and mid 60s, a man named Ingo Swann started working with the Stanford Research Institute, developing a method whereby the subconscious mind could talk to the conscious mind clearly. And what they found out was that just like in any martial art, the subconscious and conscious don't talk to each other, but they both talk to the body. And so they developed what is actually a physical martial art, which will let the subconscious mind pass messages through the body, and you can look at the results and say, oh, I know what that means. For instance, you start out saying, with beginning students, you start out saying, draw me land, and they will generally draw a line. You say, draw water, and they'll generally draw waves and stuff like that. And you do this just like in karate or any other martial art. You do this repeatedly until it becomes such a habit that it's automatic. And then what happens is you can actually say to a person who is trained in this martial art, there's a target location, and it's location number 9504, and describe it. And, on nothing more than that, their hand will automatically make a jiggle, and they look at it and they say, oh, well, I don't know what the place is, but I know there's land and water and something man-made on top of the water. And so the subconscious mind has actually made squiggles in a code that gives the information to the viewer. From that point on, you do other things that are also physical that will give you highly, highly detailed information. Now, that's called controlled remote viewing, and it's very much a physically based setup where the subconscious mind, which seems to have psychic ability, can pass messages to the conscious mind, and on cue, in fact. And generally what you see on the internet as remote viewing, not controlled remote viewing, but remote viewing, is psychic work. Some of it is very good. I wouldn't put it down, but it's all mental. It's not physically based. It's not a martial art. It's, sitting there with your eyes closed or something and saying, just whatever thoughts come to mind or whatever. And so it's all mental. The military's controlled remote viewing was actually a physical discipline.
So, what would happen? You would have a tick, a muscle reflex?
Highly trained, yes. And every tick, every muscle reflex. When you get into the higher stages, your mind will start passing you information through your other senses besides your muscles, and you will actually start smelling things at the sight. seeing things like in a daydream, hearing things, and so on. But this takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of practice, and it takes a lot of being willing to just turn all of your senses over to your subconscious mind and get out of the way. And, you know, any martial artist, kung fu fighter, gets into a fight. If he starts thinking consciously about what's going on, he's going to lose. But if he turns it over to his subconscious will know when to wax on, wipe off, and make all the moves that will protect him and win the fight. And so it's definitely a methodology that trains the subconscious mind to talk to the body, and the conscious mind just sort of sits back and watches and gets the pictures, gets the smells, gets the sounds, reports them, and in the process, the target, event, location, or whatever gets thoroughly described.
And they will not have a political opinion, I assume.
Oh, right.
They would have no idea. It would be unbiased. That's
right. The political opinions and all that, they're purely conscious mind. The subconscious, you give it the responsibility of reporting the truth, and it takes that seriously, and it reports the truth. One of the things we found also was that the subconscious mind not only knows what's going on around the world now and in the past and in the future, but also it knows where your car keys are, what your phone number was when you were 5 years old. It knows why you do those things you don't want to do, but you wind up doing them anyway, and so forth. And so because of that, many psychiatrists, psychologists, psychotherapists, and all have started learning the controlled remote viewing in order to help them get into the subconscious mind of their patients and gain the truth from them.
Now, this brings me to the question of, I was listening to one of your interviews where you were talking about having gone into the mind of a dictator.
Yeah.
And of course, this one thing that I always struggle with when in our job we have to, especially as an empath, because my work is a little different, I will emotionally assume their position. What makes that person... Pardon me?
Not a good idea at all.
I know. What makes them good or bad? How does one define somebody under duress as good or evil?
Well, you don't. In controlled remote viewing, you don't. You simply report what's in their mind. And one of the beautiful things about controlled remote viewing is that you are asking your subconscious what's in the mind and the emotions and the motivations and all that of, say, some foreign leader. What are his plans and intentions of, for the next week and so on? And the subconscious just reports it. And, you've asked it a question, it gives you an answer, and you don't have to get involved. But I know that with many, many natural psychics, especially the good ones, when they access a person mentally, they get what we call getting sucked in, and they come away needing to detox from it, to get rid of the connections with that other person's emotions, thoughts, plans, and intentions, and so on.
It's very challenging if you were surrounded by targets. So some of my colleagues are asking questions already. And I wanted to also ask you, actually mention to our listeners that Lyn was also a great computer programmer, still is probably, and you were part of the database management. And was that helpful in being able to ascertain statistical score points? Is that how you did it, or would it have been done question by question? Like, do you?
Well, when we did our sessions and reported the information that we got, we would put that into a database in detail. And what we do now is we put it in one perception per line. And then we say, okay, this perception was red, that's a color. This perception was big, that's a size, and so on. And we just make a little note of what type of perception each perception was. Then later, when we get our feedback, we can look at the feedback, go and judge each perception on its own merit. And that's what goes into the database. And what comes out is information that says, hey, this viewer is really, really good at colors, but really stinks when it comes to being accurate at sizes or shapes or something like that. And in doing that, we make a profile of each viewer's strengths and weaknesses. Then let's say a police department comes in and says, we want to identify the getaway car. Okay, what color is it? You go to the viewer who is good at colors and have him do the session only on colors. He may have an average accuracy of, say, 70%, but he's 90% correct in colors. Okay, then the shape of the car, you go to a person who has 90% accuracy in shapes. Okay. And in doing that, you can take a team of remote viewers who are fairly average and get extremely detailed and dependable information from them.
So that's fascinating. So it's like they have an array of people that they can utilize. And how big was this team at the time, at its biggest point?
We never had more than 6 people.
So that you would be a core person, and they would occasionally bring in somebody of a better, sort of a different skill and so forth, or same 6 people.
We same 6 people all the time, and because we were a unit of 6 people, a complete military unit of 6 people, we all had, like they say, many hats. I was a viewer. I was the trainer of incoming people. I was the property book holder. I was signed for all the property. I was training officer for a while. I was the database manager, and we all had many hats, but we ran a very efficient unit, and we did a lot of good. We saved a lot of lives.
I know, I can believe it. Now, one of the things you have in this kind of a team, I think, in terms of when people guard secrets, how did you guys manage? Surely there must have been a person in there this is what I wonder, would a person in this team maybe have the power go to their head a little? What I see in the psychic culture, I'm sure I've been guilty of it too, is, I can read their intentions, and to a certain extent, that can become an invisible shield, a defense.
Yeah.
But because that's a natural human reaction to knowing a secret, having a little bit of a defense power. How did you guys manage that kind of information?
We had psychological tests coming in, and very thorough psychological testing before we were ever allowed to even be read on to the unit to find out that there was a unit. Over the years of the military unit, we had, I think it was 18 viewers. Of those 18, there were only 2 who like you say, have let it go to their head, and they have caused problems for the unit, and now they're out in the civilian area. Some of them, one of them is still causing all kinds of problems for the entire field, but the rest of us, we found out that how much of the world we don't know. And for the rest of us, it was a very humbling experience, finding out things that we believed and that we were definite about and, opinionated about and wrong. And, we would find the truth, and we would sometimes say, oh no, what have I been thinking all these years? It was a very humbling situation.
That's a good word. I mean, the things you would have found out would have been probably hidden areas on the planet. I can imagine that must be amazing. I'm sure there must be islands we don't know about. UFOs, maybe, extraterrestrials. You're an artist as well. So yes. You had to reflexively express that through your art, as from what I can see that you were doing. What else would you say would be an amazing thing without, being able to jeopardize your work? What would you say would have been in the areas more fascinating for you that you can talk to us about?
I think one of the most fascinating things that I learned from all of this, as far as a general principle, was that everything you've learned about time is wrong. Everything you've ever learned in school or in science class or everything about time, it's just not true. And you'll hear a lot of people say, oh, there is no time. Everything, everything's happening at once and all. That's not true either.
No, I know.
We found out that in the controlled remote viewing, we could put a viewer someplace and we could say, okay, describe what's right in front of you. Now move back 10 feet. And the viewer would mentally move back 10 feet and start describing again. And we found out that there is no difference remote viewing wise between that and saying move back 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Nor is there any difference between move forward 10 feet and move forward 10 years. And what we found was that time and space are not what you've always been told, and that time is not the fourth dimension. Time is actually three-dimensional itself, and in fact, you can go various directions in time rather than forward and back. Now that takes about 2 or 3 hours of explanation, and so I won't go into it, but it was one of the most amazing things to me.
Don't tell me there's an axis in time, like XYZ.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Fascinating. That would make sense. And what about UFOs?
We were, okay, I'm going to be very picky with my words here, okay? We were never officially tasked to do any UFO activity. That doesn't mean that we weren't unofficially asked many times. And of course, when a 4-star general or a senator asks, you don't say no. And so we did do UFO targets, ET targets and all that. And, ET bases, landing sites, events, and so on. But they were never officially governmentally tasked to our unit. And so the government stayed clean of it, but we were contacted as individuals now and then on, from people in the government or whatever to do these kind of sites. And I found them to be very interesting sites.
I find that fascinating. You mean they kept you away from the more imaginative side of things and kept you
No,
based on
no,
humans?
they didn't keep us away from it. They just never officially tasked us with it.
Yeah,
They
that's
just never
fascinating.
pushed us toward it.
Or not that you knew of, right?
um, Not that the viewers knew. Now, as the database manager, I always got the information about the project at the end to enter into the databases and write the final reports and so forth. And um, so I can absolutely say that the targets that were officially tasked to us were military, governmental, strategic, operational, and so on.
Now, you had this, in terms of your work with computers, you meant that, and I'd love to talk with you about this. We got into it a little bit. So you were able to learn that you could affect computers through not your emotional state or through your CRV training. I'm
Not
not
through the
clear
CRV
which.
training, no. I had been doing this since I was about 12 years old,
Oh,
and
gosh.
affecting things. Um, when I was about 14, I'm kind of like Charlie Brown in many ways. There was this cute little redheaded girl, and I had developed a way of making one object go through another without leaving a hole. And I showed her this trick, and she was very impressed and went home and told her father, the Pentecostal minister. And so the next day, as I was walking home from school, he and three of his deacons met me on the sidewalk, introduced themselves, and asked to see it, as though they were extremely interested in. And so I showed it to them, and immediately they slammed me down to the sidewalk, had their hands pressing my head into the sidewalk and screaming for the devil to come out of me and all this. And it just taught me on a very real basis that if you can do this stuff, you don't let people know. And that stayed with me for a long time. However, when I would get angry, this ability would come out, and things usually when I'm angry, bad things will happen around me. As a result, I wound up being one of these poltergeist kids, and as you know, instead of emotionally disturbed, I was always curious about it. I wanted to know why it worked, how it worked. And every time something happened like that, I would go investigate and try to science it out. So anyway, when I was in the military, I was overseas, and I had written a computer program, and this other sergeant had decided that he wanted the job, but I got it. And so when I was demonstrating this program to the generals of 12 different countries, he came in and gimmicked up my program so that it failed. And I got flaming mad. And when I did, it cost the taxpayers of several countries many millions of dollars to replace equipment. Anyway,
I wonder if
but
they have psi insurance.
yeah. But anyway, the commanding general of the U.S. Intelligence Command got wind of it because he had people trained to pick up on things like this. And so he came out to the unit, out to Germany, where I was stationed, and grabbed me and just put me into, he wanted to start a unit that would, in the beginning, destroy enemy computers, but then along the way, learn how to control what's in the computers so as to make any missile they fire turn around and go back at them, lead their planes totally off course, and mess up their, their computers generally for all different kinds of purposes. And Congress said, not no, but excuse the language, hell no. And so he had me in D.C., and he had already pulled me out of Germany. He had nothing to do with me because they wouldn't fund the project he wanted to start. So he took me by the remote viewing unit and just sort of dumped me in there. And listen, I've been glad that he did ever since. So just this has been the most natural and most exciting and the most interesting thing that I think any soldier could ever do. And as a civilian now, I'm not surprised that much anymore by what my students can do. But if I ever quit being amazed by it, I'll go back to programming computers. There's more money in it anyway.
Oh, touche. So I'm going to put us through to an ad for 1 minute, and then we will be back and have additional questions for you.
Okay.
A new era in psychic services has begun. PsychicAccess.com. You can connect with our psychic advisors by telephone or chat 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All of our psychic advisors are interviewed, fully verified, and accuracy tested, assuring you quality service. We're living in some very troubled times right now. More and more, the world's problems are affecting us on a personal level. You don't have to deal with this alone. Our highly accurate psychics, caring advisors, and talented mediums can help with situations you are currently experiencing and can let you know what the future may hold for you. All new customers get a free 6-minute reading. All you have to do is register. Why not visit us now and get a free reading at PsychicAccess.com.
So, Lyn, this brings me to all kinds of interesting things here. Though I absolutely think that global warming is a reality, do you think that, people like us or yourselves could be affecting the weather?
People like us, or
Yeah.
I think that it would be possible to affect those who are affecting the weather. How was that for wording?
I'm finding that very interesting because I think that I can deduce what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
And this would bring me to the point of, okay, we're all wondering what that means. But do you think that it would be, let's say, an intelligent intention? Let's say to affect these things would be intelligent enough to be selective in its destruction? Is it compassionate? Is it kind? Can we trust it?
The people who are causing the global warming? I would not.
No, those, I think we already have a problem with those. But in terms of, say, persons like yourself, I mean, surely if, you were affecting systems, computer systems, or any kind of exterior matter around us, wouldn't that be intelligent? You see, I have found that, when I do things wrong, or what could be considered wrong, that I haven't consciously decided to cause that event. Then the event occurs, and it just so happens that it's maybe the right type of event, and that I wouldn't have consciously have decided to have done that. Your unconscious is intelligently deciding that. Yet if you put a bunch of people together.
Yeah.
But do enlighten us, of course, we're all very intrigued by the weather and such, and now it brings us back to the question here that some of my colleagues were asking in terms of what I wanted to bring in was, so were there any ethics involved in, because the CIA, those were early days still, actually very early days for the CIA. The CIA was only really officially created in the 50s, right? Do you give us a little history here of the how you guys came across remote viewing? Was it linked? Who discovered it first? Was there a remote link to Russia? Where were the origins? In the Third Reich? And,
Well,
we have all these questions.
Yeah. Let me just give you the quick rundown of the total history. Adolf Hitler wanted to live forever, and he had read in the Bible that the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve were kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Do you know why, by the way, they were kicked out?
Apart from the rib, the kiss, her being a female, not really. I've read a few versions of it.
The Bible says that Adam and Eve were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, lest they also eat of the tree of life and live forever.
Right, forgot that part.
Hitler absolutely wanted to live forever and reign forever and so forth, and he believed this, and so he started units, and this is where, the thing of hunting for the Ark of the Covenant and all of these things that you see in the Indiana Jones movies and all. But that stuff really happened, and he started a unit called Dr. Grunbaum, and that's a name of a person, but there was never a person. There was never a Dr. Grunbaum. That was just the name of the unit. But they started looking into Hebrew mysticism, the ancient documents and all that. And they were developing things like subliminal work, what the Russians wound up calling hypnosis at a distance. And they were developing these things. Well, when Hitler lost the war, the the four main countries came in, and all four, Russia, Great Britain, France, and the U.S., started taking nuclear physicists, rocket scientists, and so on. Nobody's really interested in all this, psychic warfare stuff except Russia. And so Russia took the Dr. Grunbaum people, and they started developing it in secret. Well, by the late 50s or early 60s, we were losing classified information just as though there was no bottom in the bucket, And so they kept looking and looking and looking. And finally, a Russian scientist who had been working on this problem, a guy named Penkovsky, defected or tried to defect. The KGB killed him. But we got the papers, and they're called the Penkovsky papers. And we found out that Russia had these very effective psychic spies. Well, they decided, everybody had a laugh about that, but then they decided, what if it actually works? And so they started a unit, and unit of like 2 people, and that unit actually set up these things where they would find a psychic, have them spy on classified information of the U.S., because, we could get feedback that way. The Russians wouldn't give us feedback, but would spy on classified information of the U.S. And what they found out was it was amazingly accurate, and it scared them. And they said, okay, we need to find 2 things. We need to find out how to do this ourselves, and we need to find out how to protect ourselves and our classified information from it. And so that's where the unit started back in the early 60s. They went out to Stanford Research Institute and hired 2 laser physicists to start working on this problem. And they did, and they got in touch with a guy named Ingo Swann in New York, and he came out and basically invented controlled remote viewing.
And so, I mean, that's just fascinating. So we have now, we're at this stage now where it was declassified in the 90s.
It was
which,
effectively declassified. It was never declassified. It was effectively declassified, which means that if we talk about it and say anything about it, it's okay. But there's always that kind of big rock hanging over our head that can drop any minute because it was never actually declassified.
Imagine that now with all the things in the media, with all the psychics and remote viewing and all that coming up, that must be even confusing you. You know, you must have some superior training to have to resist, say, outside influences that would trigger your responses, perhaps, or a corrective
Not really.
behavior.
You just have to realize that we have a good thing, and everybody in the world is trying to jump on the bandwagon and call themselves remote viewers. When when this first came out, we had people on the internet advertising that they were palm remote viewers and crystal ball remote viewers and tea leaf remote viewers and so on. And a lot of that has died down, but there are still people out there who are claiming to be remote viewers who actually have no idea what the controlled remote viewing actually is.
And so this is my point. I think what I was saying was, in a way, if when we're unknowingly contracted to work for another country, let's say, like, you know, that story, I think the Minority Report, where they have, is that the movie where they have, you know, 3 psychics in a pool and they're sort of put into a semi-sleep state and kept as hostages.
Oh yeah, I've seen part of that movie. I've never seen the whole thing.
It must trigger you, imagine, but I mean, or maybe it's just a cheesy version of it. But I think that the idea is kind of terrifying. So let's say, you know, I would imagine or would hope that at least that information release would be intelligent. Or does it actually sort of nullify itself? Can when a remote viewer sees something, aren't they given something intelligently so that, you know, it doesn't annihilate even the enemy? Because the enemy as a human may not have the same foreknowledge as perhaps the information has, and the information, the raw information.
I think I see what you're getting at. When we do remote viewing and we ask about a present target, we get a high degree of accuracy of information. When we are asked about past events, past places, and, you know, move back 100 years, now describe this location, and so on. And that tends to be highly accurate information. When you talk about the future, here's where everybody has their own theory and nobody agrees, you know. But let's say that, give you an example here. Let's say that I view myself as I will be tomorrow afternoon, and I find out that I will be lying in the morgue dead because I had a car wreck. I'm not getting in the car tomorrow, you know, and so the future is definitely changeable. And so there have been many times, in fact, when there, you know, they will say, where's the next terrorist attack? And we will do the information, provide the information for them, and they go prevent the attack. Now, that means that we were wrong. On paper, it means that we were wrong. But the fact is, the information that we provided changed the future.
I think that is fascinating for all of us that get rated online, by the way. Some pretty good news. Speaking of us that are online, many of us are wondering, oh my goodness, could we be in any way we were recruited? Is this still of an active operation? And with the current climate of where they're reconstructing ethics within the CIA and NSA, we want to know, is it still around?
I hope so. When you retire, they quit telling you things, and I've gotten the party line that it was all disbanded and doesn't exist anymore and all that. I seriously hope that they have it, because it would be stupid for them not to. But of course, that changes the question to, does our government ever do anything stupid? And so I know the answer to that one. And so I really have no idea whether they still have a unit or not.
But you see, I think for you, I think what I'd love to know from you, from one of the originals, from the aspirations, the early days of the CIA, it was very new then when you joined, and what it is now. What recommendations? We say it's so obvious. We all say it would be so much easier if we run it. What would be your prime recommendation? Would it be attitude? Would it be counseling? How does one cope with the information?
Oh, how do you cope with the information? Many times you find out information that on a conscious level will scare you, will disgust you, will please you, will excite you, and so on. And you deal with it in the same manner you deal with information of each type that you read in the paper or whatever. We have found out information about our government, other governments, and so forth that have just made us flaming angry, and we fuss and fume and all that for a few days. And of course, the thing is, if you're a civilian, you can say something about it. We never could to anybody. Couldn't even go home and say anything about it. And so you deal with information the way you deal with any information. And, a lot of people will say, yeah, the world's coming to an end, so what? I don't care,
Hate that, yeah. Well, I wonder if, though, you get stronger over time.
Yes.
Many of us psychics don't have the training, so do you think that at least some of the training in a structured environment was very helpful to you being able to deal with this, at least knowing you're part of a team, you see, because most of us readers here, not that we can in any way say that, we're on your level, but in terms of, I just think the support that we have, we're competitors to each other.
Yeah, I know, and that's a shame, because you could do so much more by cooperating. The controlled remote viewing was developed in such a way that it is a martial art, can be taught to anyone. And now and then, well, back when I was teaching, I would have one class a year for good natural psychics who could prove that they were good, not just claiming that, for good natural psychics. And instead of teaching them the remote viewing part of it, which they were already good at, I would teach them the controls. And in the South, we have a saying called "it's a barn burner," and I would watch the good natural psychics who had learned these controls and were no longer just at the mercy of their subconscious or the psychic ability or whatever. And I would sit there and, have them as my students, and I would sit there and watch them work. And going through my mind would be, not on my best day could I ever even touch that. Just fantastic, amazing work. Once a good natural psychic learns to control the ability and learns to clearly talk with their own subconscious, it's just amazing. It's just.
But I think you have to be a nice person, don't you think?
Yes.
To be in this type of work.
One of the things about this is you learn very, very quickly that what goes around does come around. And if you try to hurt people, you get hurt. If you try to help people, you get help, and from just unknown places, and ethics is an extremely important part of controlled remote viewing.
Your book, you're writing a book right now on ethics, which I think is I'm definitely going to buy. I mean,
it's for psychics too. It's not only for controlled remote viewers, it's for remote viewers, natural psychics, and so on. There's a strong need for ethics in this field.
Absolutely, and I'm just going to be fascinated to see how that develops with you, because you're taking it from a standard model and you are adopting it to yours, and you've written to your experiences. And with the couple of minutes I have left, I wanted to make sure that, for one, I'd love to have you back and talk about at some point maybe, remote influencing and maybe your work with computers, and if ever you have any extra time. And we want to make sure that we want to support your wife through her healing as well at this point, and send her out some good thoughts. And please tell us a bit about your book before we go.
Okay. My book, The Seventh Sense, which is already out, and is one of it's the only book that I know of right now that actually gives you exercises that will prepare you for doing the work, and will take a natural psychic and actually strengthen their ability tenfold. Those exercises are in the appendix of the book, but the book itself is it starts out with the day that I arrived at the unit, and ends basically after I retired, and it tells what happened in the unit. It tells the unclassified things that can be told about what we did as a unit, and it tells what I learned as a person, as a member of society, as a member of a race, and so on. And it tells basically it lists my own personal growth because of the training and the information and knowledge that I got over that period of time.
Well, I can't wait to read it, and I'm just getting to know your field. It's fascinating. It is vast. It is highly specific. It is not spiritual, and I am just going to be devouring it over the next few months, and can't wait to continue to get to know you. Lyn, thank you. Thank you so much for coming in tonight.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me. I enjoy this.
Real respect for the work you do. I know it is extremely taxing. I'm just so glad that at this point it's somewhat more acceptable and out in the open. Though you must be wanting to tear your hair out because everybody is trying to emulate you, and they're getting it wrong. And, I just...
The thing is, what goes around does come around. And every time they get it wrong, hopefully they won't stick with the wrong, and they'll say, hey, that didn't work. Maybe I should try something else. And I think that, we've got 30 years under our belt, 40 years now under our belt. And when they get the 40 years under their belt, they'll be doing great too. So I think we had an easy learning process. They're taking the hard road, but I hope they'll get there.
I know. I think as long as they don't watch too much YouTube, they'll be all good. Well, thank you so much, Lyn. Hey, it was an absolute pleasure meeting you. Thank you so much for introducing yourself to our guests and to our wonderful, wonderful listeners all across the world. And I am really looking forward to this being further developed and written into some really fantastic stories, and reading your book as well. Thanks again. And please,
if you could give my website too. There's a lot of information about CRV on my website.
Absolutely coming up, Lyn, and we're going to just continue to talk about this when you're gone. It's just so bad that we have to disconnect right now. But we'll stay in touch, and if not, our subconscious will.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Res Miranda, If you're having relationship, career, or life issues, I'm inviting you to experience what it's like to have access to professional, highly accurate psychics and spiritual advisors you can trust to care and help you. Register now to get your free 6-minute reading by telephone or chat. Get answers. Get access. Psychic access. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. PsychicAccess.com.